5, 4, 3, hands on keys, turn. Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel. I trust your NaNoWriMo for 2018 is going well. Mine is kind of not. I'm a little bit behind. I hope I can make it up later tonight and tomorrow and get back on track. But today I bring you an interview with Steve Vera. Steve is a New York author and fellow Air Force veteran. He is the author of the last of the Shardyn Trilogy. Book 1 is Drynn, Book 2, Through the Black Veil, and Book 3 is Bloodsworn. Now, full disclosure, I'm only about halfway through the first one, Drynn, but this is exactly my kind of book. What it's about is about 17 years ago, 5 knights from Earth's magical twin imprisoned a Dark Lord. Now the Dark Lord is free in modern-day Montana, and it is up to a local police chief and the now magicless knights to stop him. So they're using all kinds of modern-day weapons and some ancient ones, too. If you like your urban fantasy with a little bit of sword and sorcery mixed in, it's really good. Reminds me of... There's a Dean Koontz book called Lightning where things go really weird, and it reminds me of that quite a bit. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But without any further ado, here's Steve Vera. Okay, and welcome back to Quantum Froth Dispatches, and today I'm sitting with Steve Vera, and he is author of the last of the Shardyn series, trilogy. So, Steve, would you let us know a little bit about yourself and like what are you doing? What are you working on right now?
Right on, yeah. My name's Steve Vera. I hail originally from Connecticut, but I've lived in 8 states. I've served briefly in the United States Air Force. You might be able to relate to that. So it's kind of funny. I'm one of those ambidextrous people in the brain because half of my life is dedicated to the restaurant business, which is I was born and bred into, and I swore on everything I hold sacred and holy that I would not do, and I've always been a dreamer to become an author. So I spliced my time between that. I wrote my first book beginning at 21, thinking there was no way that I could actually get an entire novel written in a lifetime, but well, once that happened, once the journey began, I was addicted, and here we are 3 books later.
Nice. So yeah, that'll segue me right into the first sentence. So a lot of times, people's first book to be published isn't the first book they wrote.
Right.
So is that
it actually is. It is the first book that I wrote. I know it's kind of unusual. I didn't know what the stakes were. I didn't know what the odds were. If I'd known, perhaps I wouldn't have been so intrepid. But yeah, I began this book. It was a book that I always wanted to read. And it just was inside of me, and I started writing it. It took me 6 years to write the first 40 pages.
Wow.
And that was because I just didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to write. And long story short, I left the restaurant, and I was struggling. And one of my compatriots gave me a parting gift. How to write and sell your first novel. I was like, hey, thank you very much. This just might come in handy. And as soon as I started reading it, I was like, I'm doing this. It was like the common pitfalls of the first author, of a first-time writer. I do this wrong. I'm editing as I write. I'm doing all this. So once I gleaned those little tidbits, I was able to go ahead and write. And the way that it went was I was working at a restaurant. And when you don't have a table, I was always in the corner with my book, always just scribbling as fast as I could.
Wow.
So everybody knew this. Everybody knew that I was always writing. And this is in West Palm Beach now. I've lived in 8 states. But a published science fiction author came into our restaurant And of course, I was in the corner scribbling furiously. So all the girls like, "Oh my God, Steve, there is a published author right now in your section." Not in my. It wasn't even in my section. It was in another section. You're like, "Go and talk to her." I was like, "I don't know what to say to her. What do I do?" They were seriously pushing me. I got a 5 top and a 3. I got triple sat at that time. Like, we will take care of this. Go and talk to this author. Long story short, I introduced myself. She was gracious enough. Her name is Linnea Sinclair. She was gracious enough to offer to read my first chapter after we had talked, and give me feedback. And I remember to this day, she was like, "If you're not any good," she goes, "I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to blow sunshine up your ass. But if you're not, even if you're not, I'll beat it into you. I'm a teacher." Wow. Imagine that. So it's kind of an epic tale, but to be pithy and succinct, she told me the books that I need to write. Once she read it, she said basically, what I possess cannot be taught. She said, but what I lack can very easily be taught. And evidently my grammar was atrocious.
Okay.
And long story short, once I was done, she's like, "Give it to me. I'll make a call. And instead of languishing in some slush pile somewhere, I'll make a call, and you'll at least be at first on top. So you will, your work will either stand or fall on its own merits.
But it'll get read.
But it will get read, at least. And what more could anybody ask for? I mean, just for this person to even take an interest in me, and she's paying it forward. I mean, I am eternally grateful to her. And she warned me. She's like, "Look, it's your first book. You're not going to get offered representation. It's not. But what we will get is we'll get honest feedback, how to make you better."
Nice.
I was like, "Oh, that's all I need. Thank you very much." We submitted it. I was like, "Okay, so working on this, trying to hone my craft," and I'm expecting to get rejected. And I get an email from her. And she says, "Is this the first book that you've written?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Of course, I was writing this book with you. Yes, I have written no book, any other books. And it was Sarah.
Wow.
She was just starting off, and she said, "I think she might offer you representation." And that was, huh? I was like, there's no way that could happen. I thought you said that doesn't happen. She goes, "No, it doesn't happen." So I was like, "Well, I don't understand." I was so geared for that rejection. And I can remember I was, how they say people are in cloud 9. Well, I was like on cloud 754 when I got that call. And it was with Sarah. I got an opportunity to talk to her. And I remember one line, because I know I'm rambling a bit, but one line after she'd read it and we talked about it, she goes, "So I have a question for you. How many other agents have you submitted to?" I was like, "You're it. You're the first agent that I've submitted to. I'm going on Linnea's, on her referral. If she says that you're good, you're who I want."
Yeah.
And then she said, "I have one last question for you." She's like, "After this, do you have any other ideas? What do you have in the pipeline?" I was like, "Oh, geez." I said, "I have like 16 notebooks just filled with bits of dialogue and concepts and characters." I was like, so I could write, just with those books, I could write for the rest of my life. But if somebody burned them, I get ideas every day. I will write for the rest of my life. And I just remember dead silence. And then I remember, good answer. And so we started chopping it from there.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have no shortage of ideas or anything like that. Do you take any like dreams or nightmares or anything and write them into your stories?
Well, dreams and nightmares definitely influence my writing, and the reason it is I just grew up one of those wusses. I mean, I got nightmares so easily. My imagination was so vivid that I couldn't watch scary movies. So in the same way that you're afraid of the water, I'm afraid of the water, so I got scuba certified. I'm afraid of heights, so I wanted to go to jump school. It just the only way that you're going to conquer it. So, at least in the first trilogy, I would call it 3 parts fantasy, 1 part horror sprinkled with a little sci-fi.
Nice. Okay.
And that horror element came from, I would watch movies and get frustrated because you always see the victims. It's like, and I know you're going to relate to this, Aliens, the second one, James Cameron.
Yeah.
The reason why I love that is because you have a bunch of Marines who know how to fight, fighting unspeakable odds, but at least they're not that dumb bunch of people fighting with a toothbrush,
right,
and trying to figure it out. They have a fighting chance. And I always wanted to see something of unspeakable evil and horror, but against a worthy foe, basically, and that's where it was. So those dreams and my fear of nightmares actually implemented. It was like the catalyst for writing this series.
Wow. Yeah, nice. That's really cool.
Yeah, but my normal inspiration is music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that ties into what I was going to ask. Like, how much does like music play into getting you into the zone?
It's everything. The reason why it's everything is because I hear a song and you get that feeling. If it's a good song, it invokes some kind of feeling. So it might be sadness. You know, I'm feeling bad. I want to cry. So you put in your sad playlist, or you're feeling you need to work out, or I just hear a song and I feel that emotion, and all of a sudden I say, I see a car speeding down a highway.
Yeah.
But there's somebody hanging off the roof. Why? Who did it? What's going on? Who are the characters? Why would that be happening? And suddenly, they're like, they're uranium isotopes. They're like that little pinpoint, that waypoint of emotion. And from there, you just start fleshing it out. And so I love music. I listen to music every day. So there's never a shortage of inspiration.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I use music a lot to just build my scenes and everything
Does the same thing for you?
Yeah. I like make playlists for every scene.
Really? So do you have playlists? Do you ever see it sometimes like in a movie? Like you have a playlist, a montage that you're going to have? Do you have a preference of what kind of music, or does it go all over the spectrum? No, it goes all over the place. Me too. Yeah, I love that. Right on.
It goes nuts. So in an alternate reality where you couldn't write any of your books, but you could write one other book, what would that book be?
If I could write another book.
Like anybody else, like else's, but you can't write yours.
So okay, well, like
Harry Potter or something.
All right, well, It.
Yeah.
It by Stephen King.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah, and I love Stephen King. I mean, I've always loved him. Actually, no, I have not always loved him because he was very scary. Any author that can have, and I've read it 3 times. I've read it 3 times at various stages of my life just because it's fun to go back there. And it's a big book, but I love it because any author that can have a 27-year-old sleep with the lights on still after all of this time has got a gift. I don't know what it is, but he knows how. Like, I read many authors, but there's very few authors that can just tap into that undercurrent under the psyche, and it just manifests. Like, I think about it, I get goosebumps right now. I remember and that is like, I consider him a grandmaster. So if I could ever write like anybody or write another book, it would be something like that. It would be something like that. It would be something like that.
Yeah, it is. I'm looking forward to the second part of the remake.
What'd you think of the movie? Did you like the movie?
I liked the first part, but I had some issues with some of the characters. Felt like they neglected them.
Right. Yeah, trying to squeeze in that much.
They're just.
And the funny thing is I had never watched, because I was too scared. I had never watched the original miniseries.
Okay.
So I watched that right before I went to the movies and saw the first one. So it was very fun to kind of compare the two, contrast the two. Yeah. It was good though. Yeah.
Let me see here if I have. So folks, and I think you may have answered this question because it kind of ties into what you just said, but it's like, what the stories influence you the most, either as a child or as an adult? And it could be movies, whatever.
It's a great question because the only reason that I write was on a dare. Now, I started on fantasy. I didn't evolve to horror till after, and I was just like any other kid. Like, I don't want to read. I want to be playing a video game or outside playing. I hated reading. I was made to read an hour a day when I was young, and I hated it. I despised it. Until I had that cousin, 3 years older. He's the cool cousin. Everything he did was... I like the Miami Dolphins to this day because he liked the Miami Dolphins, and I've never lived in Miami. But... he had on his bookshelf, I had never seen, this is years ago now, I pull out this book, and it was A Spell for Chameleon by Pierce Anthony.
Xanth novels.
Xanth novels, exactly. So I'd never seen a Manticore. That's the cover art. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this thing? And he's like, wow, that's a Manticore. You've never heard of it? So of course he's telling me about it because I'm the dumb cousin that doesn't know anything. So I said, is this a good book? He's like, this is the best book ever. And I was like, really? Can I read it? And then he took it out of my hands. He said, no.
Oh.
You're too young. You wouldn't understand. I was like in 7th grade. And I was aghast. I was like, you kidding me? Are you serious? So I bugged him all the time. I was like, you're not going to understand. And plus, I love these books. And I see how you treat your books. And you're not going to treat these books. So after, I don't know, it was probably 6 months, but it felt like an eternity when you're in 7th grade. I wore him down. And I read that book. And it was the best book that I had ever read. And he had the first 3.
Oh, yeah.
So I read it, and then I was like, the next week, I was like, can I read the next one? He's like, you read it? I was like, look, it's in pristine condition too. Can I read the second one? So The Source of Magic was the next one. And then the 3rd book came. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the series, but it was the son of the protagonist. Yeah. I was like, oh, man, I want to read about this guy. I like this guy. But I read that one, and that was hooked. So I remember the first day, he only had the first 3, and when I was done with it, I had no more books to read. So it was the first time that I went to my mom and said, Mom, I want to go and buy a book. And she looked at me like I grew a third eyeball. She said, really? You want to get a book? Who are you, and what have you done with my son? I was like, yes, it was Centaur Isle. And that was the beginning. I read the whole series. And of course, Pierce Anthony has written a plethora of books.
Yeah.
So I just
There's
then
like 20
the
of them.
Bio of the Space Tyrant. And then I read the Apprentice Addict series. And then I just read, and that was my portal into writing. And that was, so I skipped a lot. I didn't read Lord of the Rings till way after. I read Dragonlance, I read Forgotten Realms, and then of course Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So obviously Dungeons and Dragons played a huge role, but I didn't actually come around and hit the classics till way after. So it was a very unorthodox introduction.
Oh, yeah. And unfortunately, we're running short on time on here. So as my last question, I'm going to have to ask, what's your advice for somebody who's trying to complete their first novel or an aspiring writer or something?
Okay. The one quality that I have discovered, it's not talent and it's not skill, of course, obviously those are, but it's just doggedness. It's tenacity. And it took me 14 years to write the first one, but you only fail if you give up.
Yeah, no, that's a good rule. That is a good rule.
That's it.
Thank you very much for being on here.
I'm honored. Thank you for having me. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Right on.
You have been listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches by Michael Haspel. Music and other cues are provided by The Fat Rat. The song you're hearing is Monody, featuring Laura Brehm. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit www.patreon.com/QFD. Thank you for listening, and we now return you to your mundane reality.